from Elena in Australia. I think I didn't expect one short stopover to influence anything about my future. Back in the late 1980s, I was simply passing through New York on my way to Europe, hoping travel would help me reset my mind and figure out what I wanted next. I arrived with a friend and checked into International House, a residence for international students near Columbia University. The building felt huge and unfamiliar, and I remember standing there holding my backpack, feeling both out of place and strangely energized by everything happening around me. That first evening, we went to the canteen for a simple meal. I sat beside an Iraqi engineering student who seemed calm and observant. We exchanged small talk about our backgrounds, why we were in New York, and how overwhelming the city felt to someone visiting for the first time. He asked about my studies, so I told him I had recently worked with an electron microscope in Australia. To me, it was just part of my job, nothing dramatic. But he listened closely and asked a few thoughtful questions about what kind of work I had actually done. He mentioned there was an electron microscopy unit at Columbia and suggested I should apply for a job there. I assumed he was just being friendly, maybe trying to make conversation. It didn't occur to me that he meant it seriously or that anything could come from it. I explained I didn't have a US visa and wasn't planning to stay long. New York was only a quick stop before backpacking through Europe. At the time, the idea of applying for a research job in another country felt unrealistic, especially when I didn't even know how long I'd remain there. The next evening, I returned to the canteen with low expectations of seeing anyone I recognized, but he approached me again with a focused expression, like he had been waiting. He was polite, but there was a seriousness in the way he asked if he could talk to me for a moment. He told me he had already arranged an interview for me with the professor who ran the electron microscopy lab. I was stunned and didn't know what to say. It felt surreal that someone I barely knew would take action on something I had mentioned so casually the night before. I felt awkward and unsure how to react. I hadn't asked for help, and I didn't want him to think I expected anything. It felt strange to have a stranger take my skills more seriously than I had taken them myself, especially when I didn't think I belonged in that world. Still, I agreed to attend the interview out of respect for the effort he put in. I didn't believe anything would come from it, but I didn't want to seem ungrateful. Mostly, I went because I was curious why he thought I should even bother showing up in the first place. When I walked into the Columbia office for the interview, I felt completely out of place. The professor's office was small and packed with papers, and before he could even ask anything, I told him I didn't have the correct visa, hoping to set expectations early. He surprised me by taking it in stride. He said the department could help with visa arrangements if they believed I was a good fit. I remember feeling taken aback because no one had ever dismissed such a big obstacle so simply before. What I thought would be a brief, polite conversation turned into a genuine interview. He asked detailed questions about my previous microscopy work, and I realized he was actually listening closely. It felt strange to be evaluated seriously when I hadn't even planned on being there. Then he asked when I could start. I almost froze. I had come in expecting nothing, and suddenly I was sitting across from someone, offering me a real job. I didn't know whether to feel excited or completely overwhelmed by how fast everything was shifting. When I stepped back outside, the noise of the city felt louder than usual. I stood on the sidewalk trying to process what had just happened. A conversation I barely remembered had somehow opened the door to something I never imagined pursuing. Fun fact, in the late 1980s, getting legal work in the US as a traveler or newcomer was incredibly difficult. Without the right visa, most employers wouldn't even consider an interview. Many people were filtered out before they ever had a chance to explain their experience. Did you know? Even highly qualified workers, nurses, researchers, and engineers were often rejected instantly if they didn't already have sponsorship. It wasn't about skill, it was policy. That's why small acts of support could completely change someone's direction when they were far from home. After thinking about it, I realized accepting the job would mean rewriting everything I had planned. I would have to cancel my Europe trip, stay in New York longer than I expected, and take on responsibilities I didn't feel fully prepared for. It was a big decision for someone who'd only planned to pass through. Eventually, I said yes. The department began helping me with visa paperwork and the administrative steps I barely understood. I remember feeling a mix of relief and disbelief, like I had stepped into someone else's life by accident, but didn't want to step back out. When I started working in the electron microscopy lab, everything felt new and slightly intimidating. I didn't know the routines or the people, and the work environment was completely different from what I had in Australia. But there was also a steady sense that I'd been given a real chance to grow. Over time, I settled into the work. The lab was demanding, but it pushed me in ways I hadn't experienced before. Little by little, I started feeling more capable and confident, like I was finally stepping into a version of myself I didn't know existed. Not long after, the department offered free tuition for a master's degree in international affairs. I couldn't believe it. I had come to New York with a backpack and a vague plan, and now I was studying at Columbia because of one unexpected opportunity. After a few years, the experience I gained opened another door, a job in Zurich. I hadn't even thought about living in Europe in that way, but the offer felt solid, and I felt more prepared to take on new challenges than I ever had before. Life in Zurich changed everything again. It was there that I met the man who eventually became my husband. We built a life together that I never could have imagined back when I first arrived in New York feeling unsure of myself. Sometimes I look back and think about how all of this started, not with a long-term plan or ambition, but with one student in a canteen who listened to me more closely than I realized and decided to help without expecting anything in return. I never saw him again after those first 2 nights. I don't know his full name or where he ended up. There's something strange about how someone can change your life so dramatically and then just disappear from it entirely. I've asked myself many times why he helped me the way he did. Maybe he believed in giving people chances. Maybe he saw someone who needed a bit of direction. Or maybe he had been in that position once and remembered how it felt. What I do know is that my life would have been completely different without that moment. That conversation, that interview, that job, none of it would have happened if he hadn't stepped in when he didn't have to. I've tried to carry that forward whenever I could. Whether it was mentoring someone younger or encouraging someone who doubted themselves, I've always remembered how much it meant when someone did that for me without any expectation. If you've ever had a moment like that or wished you did, I hope this story reminds you that small actions can reach farther than we think. If you feel moved to share your thoughts, I'd love to hear them in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, consider subscribing.